Hello once again, everyone. So, kind of a bonus because I've been falling behind on the series a little bit, and we're back to the Longsword, though in this case I'm actually debuting my new tweak method, but that'll get a video of its own sometime. For right now, what I want to talk about is, and this is actually something I've talked about before, but it was buried in a deeper thing, so I want to give it its own time. And this is the idea of your sword going through 3 positions whenever you are attacking or defending. Now, what I mean by this is, and we're going to use the offense as the basic, and then I'll kind of loop back around to the defense. One of the things that's definitely happening to folks as I watch the defense is they do part 1 and part 2, but they get stuck there and then are not able to defend themselves in part 3. And in particular, when you're drilling, it's easy to let part 3 kind of just taper off. So what are these parts? Essentially, any cut you can do, right? Cut, thrust, what have you, has 3 components. And that's going to be where you start, where you hit, and where you end. Now, those can change quite a bit depending upon what action you're going to do, but we're going to kind of frame this with just a simple overhaul, fendenti, downward cut from my dominant side. So for reference, where I start, we'll go ahead and be fun, we'll start up high, right? This is the starting position, wherein my cut shall originate. The second part, and the place I don't want to get caught, right? I don't want to get caught between step 1 and step 2. Step 2 is wherever my strike will land. Now that could be a couple different things, but it's that idea of now I have hit, which generally is going to be your maximum extension, generally referred to as the long point, right? Which can look like a bunch of different things. But part 1, part 2. Now we come to part 3. Now part 3 can be a couple different things. Generally speaking, if I'm doing just a pure through cut, that's going to be part 1, part 2, part 3, now taking me down into a low guard, the opposite of where I started, which not only ensures that my sword comes back to me, but also that I am now set up and able to defend myself against whatever. You could also tack on other sorts of endings. We'll get to that again in a second. Now, pretty much everyone's used to that idea, right? I cut all the way through, nice and straightforward. But what about situations where you're doing 2 cuts, right? So rather than a standard through cut, right, I'm instead focusing on cutting out to a point. Well, let's look at that. Step 1, step 2, now what? I'm not necessarily going to relax, I can, but I'm not necessarily going to relax from here. What is step 3 now in my successful action? What I would recommend for your own practice is don't finish here, and don't let this drop afterwards. If you're doing a 2 cut, you need to be even more mindful of your exit. So let's look at that first example of a through cut again. This is my offensive guard, this is where I hit, and then where I could also work, and then this is where I finish. This is part of my exit. By going down low, I am not only bringing my weapon back to me, which if I wanted to could be a couple different things that load me back up to cut or load me back up to thrust, but I am also ensuring that by going all the way through, I've completed that action is done. It is easy now for me to choose to move away from it or to continue forward. Versus, if I get stuck with 1, 2, what? Now I'm having to react and start a whole new action again instead of finishing what I started and being able to start something new. So now let's look at that 2 cut again. Okay, I know I'm going to hit more directly. What could I tack on to the end of it? Couple options. You could end in a more aggressive tip forward guard. So going 1, 2, 3. Now 3 doesn't necessarily have to mean that I'm winding up and doing another aggressive action. It could literally just be standing here is okay, standing here would be better. Or alternatively, maybe even standing here would be better. And if I'm going to change my feet, maybe I'll pull back, right? That same idea of complete your action, load yourself up, and now you're set for something else. You can also take all of these options and start to turn them into exits. So, that same idea, 1, 2, 3. Now I'm getting some distance on that third action, that's getting me out of the situation I started. And especially if I'm practicing against the air, where I'm only doing, 1 cut maybe at a time, I should really be considering that. Now, let's say I want to do multiple cuts. You get a choice here, right? Let's use a through cut as an example. I'm going to do 2 full cuts through. I could go 1 and just stay there, or exit, or I could choose to 1, load, 2. So now I'm loading, that's 2 3-step cuts all the way through. But I'm not going to be able to do my second cut if I don't take that second to set myself again with my new action and then go. if I get stuck where I'm just thinking about 2 cuts, let's say, for example, a wrist cut, right? That second cut was not good quality. That second cut did not have time to fully realize. Maybe it'll hit, but you're going to get hit on the way out, I guarantee it. Versus instead, if you take that second to load yourself up again before you launch, now you're being more considered in your actions and you're not getting lost. If, for example, you're doing these transitions, let's take, for example, I'm cutting all the way down, boom, and I'm going to load up to the shoulder before I go because I've completed my action, but something happens, right? Not a big deal. I was still in a place of safety that could branch out into more places, as opposed to, well, that was it. Now I'm having to react. Now, what you can do, and how I recommend you practice this solo, is whatever action you're doing, make it 3 steps. And if you're going to do multiple actions, count all 3 steps as you go. So for example, a solo action, I'll do a thrust this time, so I haven't done a lot of thrusts. Right? 1, 2, 3. Okay? Initial action, full action, retreat. Cool. Let's do multiple actions, right? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And you're always choosing to do what starts the action, where you start from, what completes the action, the tempo you hit on, and then your exit/completion. This will lead all of your actions to being more complete. You won't get lost quite as much. And in general, it's a good mental game because when you're just whipping at the air, it's easy to only focus on the first 2 steps and kind of omit the third. But the third is the most important because hitting people with sword is not that hard. Not getting hit back afterwards is where it gets a little trickier. But otherwise, thank you very, very much for watching. We'll go over some other techniques another time.